Hello and welcome to Making It, the podcast about making theatre and making it as an artist. I'm your host, Temi Wilkey, and each week I'll be chatting to an emerging playwright, theatre maker or theatre company about how they make theatre, why they make theatre, and what they do to survive. I'm really excited to welcome Richard Gadd to the podcast today. He's a writer, actor and comedian who's become known for making work that is powerful, confessional and really pushes the boundary of his chosen genre. His show, Monkey See, Monkey Do, won him the Edinburgh Comedy Award in 2016, despite it not neatly fitting into the comedy bracket. The show was incredibly funny but also very poignant and emotionally raw. It explored masculinity, mental health, sexuality and sexual assault, all whilst Gadd ran on a treadmill. His first solo theatre show, Baby Reindeer, has just come back from a sellout run at the Edinburgh Fringe, where he won the Stage Award for Outstanding Performance. Baby Reindeer transfers to the Bush Theatre on the 9th of October, and I'm so excited to see it. Welcome to the podcast, Richard.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for a lovely introduction.
No worries.
You had nothing to be nervous about.
Thanks. My first question that I ask everyone is, how did you get into theatre? And I'm aware that this might be like kind of more complicated question for you, potentially.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've sort of always been a fan of theatre. I've always sort of followed it, but I've never really, I've acted in plays and I've done all this theatre, student theatre stuff, and I've always, and I actually did a theatre and English degree back at Glasgow University, so I've always loved theatre, despite, when I was at uni, I really indulged in comedy. Yeah. But the comedy I did was always very theatrical, so I think Baby Reindeer, which has come about, 10 years into my comedy career, finally doing a theatre piece, it sort of felt like this gradual period of self-acceptance, almost like a theatrical coming out, like because all my comedy shows were so theatrical. They were sort of theatre shows that were funny. And so, but I decided with this one, I'll just go and accept yourself, do a theatre show. And I've enjoyed it very much. And
so when you say like the comedy shows that you did, even back at uni, they were theatrical. Like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. Like so when I started out, you go on the circuit and you just try and figure out what the hell you're doing, really. And so I always knew I wanted to do something kind of different. I always found deconstructive humor quite funny.
What do you mean by that? What does that mean?
Sort of like comedy that made fun of itself. Like AntiComedy is another term for it. It's sort of like comedy that's funny because it's not. I know that sounds sort of strange.
No, but I think I know what you mean.
But I would do these. I would dress up in like a suit, and I'd pretend to be like an old school comic. But I'd come on with like a notebook and tell these really crass, awful jokes that would always bomb, and I'd like feedback as I went along in this notebook. Like I give like the jokes a score rating as they went along, and it was quite theatrical and quite different to what else was out there at that period of time. And looking back on it, not as clever as I thought it was. In fact, it makes me cringe now. And I really thought at the time, when you're young and naive and you think you've discovered something, you convince yourself that you're doing something groundbreaking.
But it's almost like meta comic, like
exactly.
There's something really theatrical in meta theatricality. So
yes,
it's
exactly.
Like there's a line that's like really close with that.
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly what it was. But what I didn't realize at the time, it would always go one of two ways. It would either go really well or really bad.
Right.
But also like, I don't know, who did I think I was? I just started out and now I'm trying to make fun of comedy as an art form. I don't know. I look back on it and it does make me kind of embarrassed. And even though the jokes are satirical, that they are bad jokes at the same time. So I don't know. I'm glad I moved away from that. But even from day one on the comedy circuit, I was trying to do something different, I guess.
And like what led you to study, was it English and theatre?
Yes.
Like Glasgow. Like, did you watch theatre a lot as a child? Like, how did you sort of get into it?
Well, yeah. Well, I went to this state school, and the drama department in the state school were like this gem of a sort of department. The teachers seemed to care way and above and beyond what you'd really expect from a state school. They were inspirational to me. Mr. Dure and Mrs. Essler were completely inspirational, and they always went above and beyond. It was always this, and I loved just looking forward to drama every single time. And they ended up doing a school play on Macbeth at the Bar Theatre in St Andrews, and I got cast as Macbeth.
Oh my God!
And I had a young romance with Lady Macbeth
at
the time.
God.
And those were like formative years, and I knew as I did that show, even though it was a school production, and I knew that this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. But when I left school, I my parents wanted me to do a degree. I thought it was maybe wise to do a degree. But the passion for acting, writing, theatre never died. It felt like 4 years of really postponing getting round to that. But at uni, I discovered comedy and did all this stuff. So it was worthwhile. But I think from that moment on, when I sort of started doing drama at school, that was when I knew that this is what I wanted to do forever.
And did you see a lot of theatre?
I did see a lot of theatre. Yeah, we were in Fife, so there wasn't much theatre in Fife. We had the Dundee Rep, and that was great. And we would go and see like the Midsummer Night's Dream. I always remember Midsummer Night's Dream. They had like an underwater pool. I remember being very inspired by that. We went to see a few things, especially if it related to the course. Like if you were doing like some Brechtian stuff, you would go and see some massively deconstructive sort of piece of theatre. But I remember being particularly inspired by we all got on a bus and went down to Glasgow. To the old fruit market and saw Black Watch. Do you remember that show?
So I've heard a lot about it. Because was Vicky Featherstone involved? Did she direct
Vicky Featherstone was involved. I think she was artistic director of the National Theatre of Scotland at that point when Black Watch. And I think John Tiffany directed it and Gregory Burke wrote it.
Cool.
And it blew my mind. I think I was like 16, maybe 15. And I just remember, I just couldn't believe it. It was incredible and moving and majestic, and I sort of feel like that's when. So if Macbeth was when I knew I wanted to do theatre, Black Watch was when I knew I wanted to do writing. I think
that's so interesting.
So the school was amazing. Yeah. Like for a school that didn't need to try.
Yeah,
they really did.
And so, you've spoken a lot about your school and that impact on like your relationship to theatre. But like, what was your parents' like kind of relationship to theatre? Did they have one at all? I don't know. I mean, they've never. This thing I love about my parents most of all, they've never said no. In a way, they could have been more pushy than they were. They're not from a theatrical background at all, but they could have been more pushy. And I'm sure, like when your kid says, "Oh, I want to go off and be a writer and an actor," they're like, "Oh God, this is going to be tough. This is going to be hard." But they never said no. They could see how much it meant to me, and they never pushed me in a direction. And I think one of the saddest things parents can do is force their child to be something they're not. Yeah, and that goes. In a career sense and a personal sense, in all kinds of ways. Like parental pressure is it can be, but they've always pushed me. They've never pushed me they've always pushed me to be the best I could be, but they've never pushed me in a direction that didn't feel suitable. Yeah. Uni was weighing up the pros and cons and listening to their advice, but I didn't feel forced by them to go. And theatre studies felt like a close enough thing to what I wanted to do anyway. So. And so. Black Watch was when you kind of realised that you wanted to write.
Yes.
When did you start writing then? Like, was it immediately afterwards, or did it take you a while?
Well, I think I always wrote growing up, sort of like, but never thought that I'd try and do it seriously. But I started to write in my own time, and again, never really thought. It's a self-conscious process, right? And, you can write loads by yourself, but like having the goal to then put it, you'll know this, to put it in front of someone is very difficult. And I wrote loads just in private to myself, but I suppose the first time I presented like my writing to someone was probably when I started doing comedy. And then I did a few plays when I was at uni, I'd written and stuff like that. But it's still to this day is like, you have that fraud. I mean, Neil Gaiman talks about the fraud police thing. He does this amazing commencement speech at a university, I think in London. And he talks about like his career, and he talks about how every day he feels like somebody's going to knock at his door and be like, "You're a fraud, time's up, we've got you." He has like a clipboard, and he wow. And every time you write something, you feel like it's such a vulnerable sort of process. Yeah. But I've been writing for my whole life. Even when I was young, my friends used to have video cameras and we'd film each other doing and make sketches, and we'd cut them together. Wow. So it's sort of been there the whole time. I never, and then I suppose recently it's become a job, which is good.
That's so interesting what you were saying about like comedy being when you first kind of put stuff in front of people. Because I guess like with theatre, if you write a play, like you need to get all the actors, maybe you want to get a director as well, so you're not having to do that. Whereas like with comedy, it can be immediate. Like you can write something down and then there's going to be an open mic somewhere and you can just see how it fares in front of a group of people. Absolutely. So like that kind of immediacy maybe is what drew you to comedy, because you're always writing, and then it's like this is the easiest way to get people to see it.
Yes, absolutely. It's funny, I never really liked comedy. I never really grew up watching it. Like I remember we'd have these sleepovers, and with your friends, and they'd you'd steal the comedy DVD of a comedian back in the day, and we'd feel really edgy as kids, putting this comedy DVD on, laughing at these things we didn't kind of understand. And I remember sort of not getting it in a way, but it was always something I sort of wanted to do. It was strange. But I really sort of got drawn to the sort of, because it's the most life and death art form in a way, in terms of the ability to make traumatic sort of memories and very positive memories, because you're going onto a stage, the arrogance of it is you're going onto a stage and you're saying, I'm worth your time. Not only that, but I'm going to make you laugh now. I mean, it's a very arrogant thing to do, and so when it goes badly, the embarrassment you can feel is unbelievable. And then when it goes well, it's very addictive. So it's a very unhealthy art form as well.
I just love that life and death. That's a really beautiful way of putting it, because it's it can bomb or it could sail. And there's sort of I mean, there's lots of places in between, but you can really tell if an audience likes something in a way that you don't have with any other art form.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, and the adrenaline and the moment, and I do get drawn to those. I do quite like that sort of. I mean, is adrenaline junkie, is that even an acceptable term anymore? but I do associate with that. I do sort of, I dread it, but then I'm addicted to the thrill, and then when it's done, I want to do it again, and that's what comedy is. It's really,
And that's interesting with the kind of anti-joke thing that we were just talking about, where it's what I think Monkey See, Monkey Do is asking from an audience was something very different, where it wasn't necessarily always asking them to laugh, or the laugh, you might have made a joke and then maybe a few beats later I might be oh wait, that was quite funny, but then we've moved on too quickly because we're on the treadmill, we're going. And also with what it sounds like with Baby Reindeer, it's kind of it is a similar thing where it's you've written something for yourself, but you're not necessarily asking the audience to laugh. I was sort of saying earlier, the line between a one-person show and a comedy show feels quite fine. Because with a one-person show, people always it does always need to be funny, or else I think it's quite difficult to engage an audience. So but then what it's asking from the audience is slightly different from stand-up. I'm just interested in the journey from Monkey See, Monkey Do to Baby Reindeer. It was interesting because basically I'd had a very, very tough 20s, and I'd gone through a lot of stuff, and that was what Monkey See, Monkey Do was about. It was basically talking about the sexual abuse that I hadn't come to terms with, and a whole myriad of stuff, and the mental problems that I'd sort of had as a result of that, my issues of masculinity and self and all these kinds of things. So I decided to, the best piece of catharsis I could maybe give myself was to just come clean about the whole thing, and just stand on the stage and try and make people understand how hard it's been and all this kinds of stuff. And, those early Edinburgh Fringe deadlines, they're April or something? Yeah, right.
And for a show in August. And I hadn't written a dot of it at that point.
Wow.
And I was well,
how did you know what was called?
I had the loose ideas, right? I had the sort of, I was thinking, and I had some maybe disastrous tryout stuff, but I remember not knowing at all what it was when I did that. But I was I'm a comedian. People know to look for me. Let's put it in the comedy section. Right. And the more I started to workshop the show and write it, the more I started to think, I think this might be theatre. So then I started doing this thing where I was okay, this is a show about sexual abuse. It needs to be serious at times, because I can't just be joke, see you later. Yeah. I need to respect the trauma of it in a way. But also it needs to be funny. I need to satisfy. So I gave myself this impossible writing job of trying to make it funny and trying to sort of do justice to the subject matter. And then so when it came around to Baby Reindeer, I decided, take a load off. Let's just pay respect to the subject matter. Yeah. Because it was tough doing the Monkey See, Monkey Do, sort of finding that balance. And I think I did in the end, and I was very proud of how it turned out. But having to write truthfully about that experience, but then also be but is it funny? It's hard.
Very difficult.
It's hard.
Yeah. I think it's just so interesting that categorization comes from somebody else, or meeting a deadline or something that actually there isn't. Because it would be interesting to know what kind of show that would have been if you didn't have to put it in a comedy bracket. If it was just genre doesn't exist, let's float between everything.
Wouldn't that be a perfect world?
Yeah, but I wonder what that would have looked like, how similar it would have been, and also maybe if it would have been as good, almost like maybe that impossible task is like part of what breeds creativity and what made it so brilliant.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think as a result of it being a comedy show, and because people hadn't seen something like that before, which was so sort of serious but also kind of funny in amongst it all, I think it stood out in a way as a result, because I don't think somebody had done something like that in the comedy world. So yeah, I don't know what it would have been like moving it into something else. It's kind of funny. There is comedy's I think the one art form as well where there's people have such a fixed view of what it is. Like I've seen theatre shows that I found so hilarious from start to finish. I can think of a million ones that I've sat and laughed more or as much as any comedy show I've ever seen. But the theatre world, I'd be like, it's too funny. Got to get yourself to a comedy club. Do you see what I mean? But comedy, there was quite a lot of conversation around Monkey See, Monkey Do. Well, is it funny enough to be a comedy show? You know, where I felt like if you're looking at like laughter rate and gag count, you're sort of missing the point. Like, what I'm trying to do is show that comedy, you know, can say and do things that enact sort of social change to a certain degree. And I always felt, as pretentious as that sounds, but I always felt like those conversations around it were kind of harsh. But so I agree. Like if we lived in a sort of a boundaryless sort of genre of art, I think that would probably be better for everyone.
And I like, it's interesting what you're saying about it being pretentious. Like I don't think that is pretentious. Like I feel like most artists, I think, do believe that their work can create some social change, or else they probably wouldn't do it. So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, I mean, and it was a funny old time. It was a crazy time. It was like 3 years ago. I thought it would be the ruin of me, the show. That was the strange thing. I thought it would ruin. I thought people would just be like, well, what's he doing? This is too dark. It's you know, I really thought it would be the ruin. It's crazy. But
that's I think beautiful, because like risk is when things are really amazing, and because you took a risk, like feeling like it could be the ruin of you is like what made it so powerful.
Yes, absolutely, and it was there was so much fear in that process, like fear of how people would react. I mean, you know, you're a creative yourself as well, and do you ever, you know, that feeling when you're hitting towards a deadline where you're going to be standing on stage, or your work is going to be on stage presented to people, and you're like, God, I'd love a car to hit me right now. Not kill me, but like just really enough to take me out of action, just for enough for like people to be like, okay, it's fine that the show.
Yeah, you can't do the show. It's fine.
Yeah.
That actually leads me on to a next question really well. Like, what is it like performing your own work? Because I've never done it. And I mean, I've only written one play and I sort of knew that I couldn't be in it. Like, what does that mean for you? It sounds like that's kind of most of the way that you've written.
Yes, it is. Yeah, I'd love to try something where I write in a bunch of other characters and that. But I suppose I've always felt like the stories that I've told have been so personal that it would probably... It would make sense that I tell them just based on the fact that I think there would be like a truth there that would help the art in general. I also think like the audience that I've built up over the years have tracked me and understand in a way. Like thankfully I've got a bit of an audience now, and and when they see the shows that Monkey See, Monkey Do, they almost understand because they've seen all the stuff beforehand that maybe have hinted at some of the themes and all that kind of stuff. So sorry, what was the question again? Sorry, did that answer it?
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It doesn't, because you're often telling personal stories.
Yes,
it feels
exactly.
like it makes sense for you to kind of be the performer. Or the center of it.
Exactly. And I do think it just gives a layer of authenticity, and also because a lot of my shows incorporate the documentary stuff from my life. I mean, Monkey See, Monkey Do opened with me. I was going to tell somebody what had happened to me for the first time, and that was like a big thing for me. And I decided to. I was walking there and I felt so queasy and I felt sick, and I went into a bathroom and this was in Soho, and I went into the bathroom, filmed myself being like I'm just off to town, I'm projectile vomiting into the and that was how I opened Monkey See, Monkey Do. So because I often try and incorporate like footage from my life, because I've always been a self-documenter in a way, that sort of it helps as well to sort of build in the truth of it as well by being in the show.
And like, what does your writing process look like? Like, how do you go about it?
Yeah, sort of obsessively bashing my head off a wall, particularly Monkey Do. And I have people who are on the team, like, I had a company called Burke's Nest, and I bounced the script off them a lot, and they were great. I love to bounce the script off people because.
When you say that, what do you mean?
Well, I'll write obsessively and until I get to the point where I'm thinking, all right, this is I've exhausted this draft. Right. This is I'm happy with this now.
Yeah.
It needs an outside eye, so you go and sit down. And so John did that really well on Baby Reindeer, and I'd say, what do you think of this draft?
John Britton.
Yes. I know. And what do you think of this draft? And he'd say, great, this bit, maybe, and I like feedback, and because you find out what you disagree with and what you agree with. Do you see what I mean? And it almost reinforces the writing process because if somebody's like, I don't like that bit, and you get like defensive over it, you're like, oh no, I like this bit, so you learn what you like. And if somebody's like, I don't like that bit, and you're like, it's not very good.
Terrible.
You start to learn what you like and what you don't like. So it's very helpful. So I love to bounce off other creative people, but mainly it's draft upon draft. I mean, hundreds of drafts. I mean, I did hundreds of drafts for Baby Reindeer and hundreds of drafts for Monkey Do, like obsessively every day.
And do you feel like that's partly because it is so authentic, like it's coming from your life, that like it almost needs to be like refined and honed over ages and ages, because it's so the material is so close and so raw that it almost needs more shaving to get it to a place where it's like
absolutely. And you'll know this from writing yourself. Sometimes you write and you're going through a process of trying to be truthful to yourself at the same time. Do you find that? So the more you write, the more you drill down into the truth of it. And sometimes you can write and be like, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go. Maybe I'll go there. Oh, okay, maybe. And it's sort of like writing and rewriting. Is you drill down into the truth of it. But I've spent hours of my life, God, maybe even years of my life, so just sit behind a laptop sort of typing. It can be quite lonely.
And so wait, do you write on a laptop exclusively, or do you do pen and paper sometimes?
Yeah, laptop exclusively, really.
Cool.
And I try not to stop. I try and just write and write and write, because I just try and keep it going, even, because the flow is important, and getting that focus and all that kind of stuff. So, I just try and get sort of lost in it. But it's I mean, there was versions of Baby Reindeer. I mean, it's funny, like it went for a 2.5-year process, really, and the way it mutated and over that period of time. I mean, there was a version of it where I think David Attenborough was the commentator on the show. I know that sounds mad.
No, I mean, it sounds great.
There was a version of it where I think it was nothing but dialogue, like between and it was all vague and in the background, because it was about a stalking, and so like there was conversation, and you'd have just me speaking to my mum in a scene, but then those things would trickle in, and there was like versions of the show which were compromised with this love angle that went on alongside it. And it went through so many different incarnations, and ultimately I decided after drafts and drafts and drafts that the best thing to do was to just tell the story. And John was great in sort of making me believe in, because I've always been a wacky comedian who shoved, treadmills on stage, and done all these mads. I turned up late to my own show. That was another one I did called Waiting for Godot. I think I was like, this needs some conceptual hook. But I think, when you bring Francesca, John on board, and they read it and they're like, this is great as it is. It sort of makes
Francesca?
Francesca Moody, producer. Sorry, I'm giving it first
not
names.
at all. Yeah.
Then they make you believe that the story's enough, and that was great. And it didn't need David Attenborough sort of commentating on the action as it happened. That doesn't make any sense, but there was method to the madness, but it was madness.
I'm really interested also in like what you were just about to say about like how lonely it can be, and I think also because often you're the only person on stage in your work, like, and it's written for yourself, like that kind of loneliness not only in the writing but also in the performance. Like, what do you do to combat that, if at all?
Yes. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I'm always going through this, like, because I love, like, it all makes it worth it when you've spent hours alone writing something, and then it's into a place where you're in front of an audience and you're working with a stage manager, and you've got such a sense of community, and you feel like you're really living your life. It's all worth it in that respect, but it can be tough, like, because there's so many. Sometimes you can be lost in development. I've had telly projects where I would love to you get the camera and get the crew and everyone's there, but for whatever reason you bounce it back and forth for years, and you feel like you spent your years sort of typing behind a desk, and you know, and you do have sort of existential moments where, like, you know, am I spending my life sort of staring into a screen? But I do love it. But it is hard. And there's been weeks and weeks where I sometimes felt like, you know, I haven't spoken to anyone.
Are you an extrovert or an introvert or someone?
Well, it's funny. I sort of battle with that question weird because I think when I was growing up, I was an extrovert massively, and I think I am an extrovert. But I think becoming more and more introverted as I grow older in a way. I like to be around people, but I think because my job is sort of extroverted, I find the need to do that less in my life.
Yeah,
like growing up, I was very loud and possibly obnoxious, and I feel like that was part of my, you know, I would always want to be out and I would always want to be doing things and being loud and all that stuff. And but I think when that started to become a job, because comedy is like it's probably the most extroverted job you can have. I think I started to feel like I didn't need to do that so much in life. I think I'm a much more likable person than I used to be. I hope so anyway. But it's I don't know. I battle with that question. I sort of don't want to be an introvert. I don't want to hermit myself away.
Well, I don't know. I feel like there's like these images of what extrovert and introverts are, and they're always extremes. And like someone really simplified it for me once. They were like, it's about whether or not you get energy from being with people, or whether you get energy from being alone. And I found that really helpful as a distinction, where there's no judgment on it. It's just this is just the way that you function best, almost.
Yes,
and I feel like sometimes I ask the question because I just find it really interesting, like I'm an extrovert for sure. Whenever I do a quiz, it's like you're 89% extroverted. It's like ridiculous.
I should do a quiz.
Yeah, you should. I love. What is it called? The 16 personalities one. It's like your Myers-Briggs. Check it out.
Okay, check it out.
Yeah, but
have you done the psychopath one where you figure out your psychopath scale? That's quite fun.
Okay, I'm going to do that next. I love any personality quiz. But yeah, I'm such an extrovert. So I found when I started writing, I was like, this is so hard. I have to be alone with my own thoughts. And sometimes it's joyous, but I think as soon as other people got involved, I was like, oh, this is great. Like I can be with other people. And I guess also being an actor as well, just like sort of being used to being around other people. Being used to bouncing ideas off other people. And it's really interesting when I asked you the question about writing, the first thing you talked about was bouncing it off other people. So I like wonder whether that kind of extroversion within your writing is there, because it's kind of like straight away I'm going to show it to somebody as soon as I can.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. Well, usually I hammer it out for a while by myself. I actually do wait until I have the confidence to show it to someone. So usually I'll introvert it to the point where I can't introvert it anymore before I extrovert it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Baby Reindeer, I think I think it was like 6 months before I plucked up the courage to show it to someone. And I think that was a friend of mine called Stoff, who is a great editor and helps me with some of the editing stuff that I do. And even a guy that I knew for years and years and is one of my best friends, I still was like sweaty palms and all that sort of mad stuff. But I just think it's important to get an outside perspective.
Yeah.
I don't think a show can be... That's why we preview, isn't it? You know, I don't know whether a show could be good if you're like, right, yes, that's perfect, let's get it. No matter
well, yeah, because it is for an audience in a way. Like I feel like there are other art forms like novels and like paintings where it's like it needs to almost be a distilled vision of what one person wants it to be, and because somebody reads it by themselves, like they're intimate, like those art forms. Whereas like because theatre and comedy and everything is public, it sort of needs feedback on it, because like this is how audience B sitting in the corner could see it, and this is how, like, I don't know, the publicness means that you sort of need feedback on it, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And you know, maybe people do sort of just be like, yeah, you know, I've written it, that's the show, and I'm not going to sort of listen to the previews, I'm not going to listen to people around. Yeah. But I think that could be quite tough, you know, because
can't imagine it being
sometimes
good.
when you write inside, exactly. Sometimes when you write inside something, you sort of can't see the wood from the trees. You know, you can obsess. There's lines in Baby Reindeer that I have wanted to cut, you know, because I'm like, but then people really relate to that. What? You know, so sometimes it can give you confidence in places where you didn't have it, and vice versa. You can be really cling to something that sticks out in an oblong way that doesn't quite sort of work, and then you realize the second it's gone, the whole thing moves cleaner and quicker. So I think it's vital. But Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe I'm halfway between an introvert and an extrovert. I don't know. I sort of want to know, but I'm not sure.
Well, please do the quiz and text me and let me know what you get.
I will, yeah.
What does like a working day look like for you?
Oh, I put myself through pretty rigorous... because it is my job, I sort of feel like I should treat it as such. So I go and I have various writing spots around town.
So you don't write in your room or in your house?
No, I get out the house really. And occasionally I will, if I'm like knackered, I'll write in, but I find it very good to sort of get out. And
where do you go? Is it like always a cafe? Do you always have to pay to be there, or like?
Well, I usually don't, because of obviously the issue, the stalking issues. I better not say. Not say.
Please don't say. Please do not.
But I have various spots around town. I keep it. I keep it just sort of varied, and I like quiet. I like a place that's quiet where a lot of people are, but not deathly quiet. That doesn't work. So, so I like the feeling of when you habituate to a lot of sound, but in the back, like cafes are obviously very good.
So do you have headphones, or do you not have headphones so you could kind of tune into that hubbub?
Yeah, no, I usually don't. I usually just sort of do it. But I put myself. I write. I'll be doing writing. Yeah, I'll be writing every day for hours, and I put myself through at least 9 to 5, and usually more. And there's some.
And do you write from 9 to 5? If you
and there's other things that you pretty much. Yeah, and there's other things,
amazing.
Emails, and like you might be editing something. Like I might be editing sound, but I'll work on projects that I'm doing for well over 40 hours a week. I'm obsessed, and even when I go to bed, I'm like flicking through my phone trying to figure out what's wrong with this treatment, what's wrong with this script.
That's incredible.
It's sort of obsessive.
Yeah.
But people say I'm too hard on myself, and I think I am. But I do enjoy it. It's hard, but I do enjoy it. But I think it's my job, and people, have to put on a suit and go into the city and do it for 40 hours. So if this is my job, then I should, put on a t-shirt and go to a cafe and do it for 40 hours as well, at least, So
I really respect that. I like I have this thing called Masterclass. It's like great, like if you're just starting out, and I was trying to write a pilot, and I was like, I just need to like learn how to write for screen. I don't know how to do this. So I like signed up for this thing called Masterclass, where you could watch somebody, like an expert, just talk. So it was Shonda Rhimes. I was like watching hers, and it was like 30 lessons. And she said, a writer writes every day. Like, and I was like, shit, I don't do that. Like, so people who like, do it 9 to 5, I find that really impressive. Like, because I feel like sometimes I'm just squeezing blood from a stone. So like to sit, whatever happens, like 9 to 5 and do it, I find really impressive.
Well, I think it's whatever works for you, because that's like, I remember, I don't know whether this was, I just remember Crispin Letts, someone I know, a lovely man, and tell me this story about two writers. It's like I think it's a fable, like people talk about this, two writers, and one would just every day sit, put themselves through their paces and write, obsessive. And then someone would just go around their day, and all of a sudden they'd be in the middle of Sainsbury's or in the middle of their gardening, and they'd be like, I've got an idea, and then they'll run to the computer and just do it. And who's to say what one's right? I suppose it's whatever one works for the person. But I think I do that because I want to. I think I do that because I just feel like if I devote as much time to it, then things quicken and things, and I just feel like I'm improving if I'm writing all the time, and that you speed processes up, and you speed like
and development, you
get out development, and you get into something practical, and so that's why I do it. But I'm not saying that it's the right way to do, and if anything, it can be the path to insanity. So I think as and when is also as good as anything.
So you talk a lot about kind of it being your job. Like, when did that happen? And also, like, what were you doing before it was your job? Like, what kind of money jobs did you have to sort of sustain yourself?
I worked in a bar for years when I moved to London. When did I start getting that job? Did I move to London halfway through 2012 or 2011? I can't remember, but I worked in that bar on and off, because occasionally you'd get like an acting job, or you'd go to the Fringe, and you'd have like a full-time, you'd have a full-time job for a little bit, and then you'd have to go back to the bar when your money ran out. But I think I left that job for good, like maybe going into 2016, just before like Monkey See Monkey Do sort of happened. And there'll be periods of time, like I got an acting job on a show called Tripped, and that made me enough money to sort of be full-time for maybe 6 months. And
when you say full-time for 6 months, as in you did the acting job and then you had enough money so that you could just write for the intervening time?
But in terms of, there being a flow of income and a flow of work, pretty much from about, I would say, I'm trying to think of Waiting for Gadd, or was it maybe from about 2015 onwards? Yeah, and then really like being it's more comfortable. It's never comfortable, but more comfortable from Monkey See, Monkey Do onwards. Really was when things started to come.
And at that point where it's like, cool, I'm making a living from this. Like,
yes, yeah, exactly. And you know, I'd kill myself to get there. And then there was times when you question whether you ever would, and you know, time can just go in a pub. You know, like time just disappears, and, you know, and, you know, the light didn't shine through the windows. You feel like you're spending your life in that place. And I loved the place, and they were very supportive to me, and they always gave me time off, and they always let me come back, and they always gave me the good shifts. But, you know, there were times when I was like, well, what do I do if it doesn't work out?
How many years were you working at that same pub? Was it
20? I can't remember. It was 2011 when I came to London. 2012. But if we say 2011, so 1, 2, 3, 4, pretty much on and off for about four years, I'd say.
And you didn't have a different job? Like it was always the pub that was kind of your mainstay?
It was always the pub. God, did I have another thing? I feel like, you know, I'd occasionally pick up like a treatment, or I'd occasionally do like a little acting job, or do something like that. Yeah. So those also supplied sort of a bit of income for me. Did I do anything else? Oh yeah, I mean, I'd had a job when I I can't even remember. It was DLR line, if I remember. But I was one of the people who dress up as an alien, jump out at you, and those scare places. You know, when you go through, how am I describing it? You go through like. Do you know, like
on the
like
tube?
The Dracula experience? No,
right.
sorry, no. It was. I just
remember
remember
you meant the DLR. Oh, right.
It was in the Docklands.
I thought you meant that, like somebody paid you to jump out at people on the DLR.
Yeah. No, it was the Docklands, and you go down and you would do, and it was like they would have guns and they'd shoot you with pellets,
right?
And you had to dress up as an alien. You'd have like armor, but it wasn't good enough because it would kill. Like these pellets would kill you, and you'd jump out and be like, and they'd shoot you with these paintball pellets. And I remember the money was not worth what it was. And I remember like it got to the point where I'd have gloves under like T-shirts, under jumpers, on it, just so the pellets didn't hurt.
Oh
no matter
God.
what, they would still hurt.
That does not sound worth it.
No, it was a tough job. So I remember doing that. I did all these odd little jobs, and but I always remember, you know, you'd see these people coming in. I don't know if this is too much of a tangent, but you'd see these people coming in, and you get lads coming in. They'd be like, "Yeah, I don't need all this armor," and they'd go in with like a T-shirt on, and they'd just be like, "Just put the mask on." They go with a T-shirt on, and they would just there would be blood streaking.
Oh
down
my
their
God!
arms, and yeah, it was brutal. It was tough, and like,
horrible job.
yeah. So I did that, and I got by, and it was tough. I lodged with a family in Muswell Hill, a friend of mine's mum. And you know, luckily she gave me a much better rate than London rates, and that allowed me to survive as well. Yeah, but it was tough. It was a tough few years.
And like, what kind of motivated you in that time, and also what keeps you motivated now as well? Because like, even though you're earning enough to like live sustainably off of writing, like it still is difficult, as we've said. Like,
yes, yeah. I just excitement and just wanting things to happen and having dreams and goals, I suppose keep you going, and that's always what's kept me going. I just like every time I do an artistic process like Baby Reindeer or Monkey See Monkey Do, I'm reminded why I'm doing it, and I just want to chase that feeling again of being in a situation where you've written something, you've sweated, you've a lot of blood for it, and then it's in a position and people appreciate it, and you're having fun doing it, and all those things. Like, it makes it all worth it. So just chasing those sort of dreams, and you know, and creating memories, I guess. Does that sound too pretentious?
No, not at all.
But yeah, I think that's enough for me, I think.
And also, like, that feeling of like knowing that you might be inspired soon, or you're working towards something, can be like what helps you. But like, also taking care of your mental health as well, like, because I guess, like, I don't know, something about the structure that you talk about makes you feel like, oh, I feel like I'd maybe be taking care of myself a lot better if I did have that structure. But it can feel quite precarious at times. Like, how do you take care of your mental health around like this kind of job as well?
Well, it's tough, and it is really tough, because you sometimes question whether it'll like ever settle. Do you know what I mean? Because your life of a freelancer, you bounce from job to job, and because I do comedy, and because I do acting, and because I do writing, it's all, you never know where you're going to be, you never know what's going to take you where, and you question whether you'll ever like settle, where you'll ever have a settled life, and you know, people who have 9 to 5s, and it's, you know, there is a slight envy of the fact that, you know, they know where they'll be at what time, they can build their life around that. But we don't have that luxury, and I find that quite tough. I would like to know that it'll get to a point where I can settle, and I can know that it's going to be all right for the rest of the time. So I can breathe out a little bit, but that's the biggest pressure, I think.
And it's interesting, like, because I feel like by creating a 9 to 5 for yourself, it's almost like giving yourself that structure that makes you like existentially on like a sort of base foundation. We will never really be settled, or maybe we will, touch wood, soon. But almost like being like, well, I'm going to be at a desk wherever it is from 9 to 5 today, and that will make me feel like solid.
Yes.
That sounds like almost that's a technique that maybe you use to like create that stability.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. And it just allows me to feel like I'm maintaining it as well. You know, it's structure is important, I think. And I think, you know, a lot of creatives do give themselves hard tasks when they don't give themselves structure, and they sort of you know, everything's seat of the pants and everything's a bit sort of last minute and rushed. I think they're doing themselves a disservice sometimes, but maybe that's, you know, maybe they're happier. Who knows? Maybe they embrace the chaos. Yeah, exactly. I mean, who knows what's right? But I certainly feel like that helps me maintain a grip on it.
And like, you kind of talked a little bit earlier, like, I'm just interested in like how you get your shows on and programmed, and like the process of like, did you self-produce for Monkey See, Monkey Do? And then also what the journey was like to getting Baby Reindeer not only programmed at Edinburgh, but then at the Bush, like what that journey is.
Yes. Yeah, with comedy, it's very different to theatre, and I guess I didn't know that. And, you know, I remember with Monkey See, Monkey Do, for example, I hired a team called Burke's Nest who were great, and you hire them, and they act as an outside eye. They book previews. They do the, you know, and they take a lot of the admin stuff off your plate, which is great. And they offer sort of creative help as and when you need it. But it was still me funding it out of my own pocket. And especially when you've got a bar job, and you know, so all the shows had to be DIY. They had to look rough and ready, like that was a choice. When reality was that you know, financially that had to be the case. You know, but I made the most of it. But you know, Monkey See, Monkey Do, I was buying, you know, treadmills off Gumtree, and like finding they're not suitable and reselling them, and buying steppers. I mean, I bought an abundance of sort of exercise equipment, and you know, so there was a self-producing element to it, and you go up to Edinburgh, you find your own flat, you pay for it, and it can be a real. I remember feeling that. I remember shoving a load of it on credit cards as well, and feeling like really like the pressure of that. So then you flip into theatre, and this is the first time I've been sort of produced in a theatre sense, which, you know, as you know, is sort of somebody sort of saying, okay, I'll license the show off you, and I'll pay for the risk in a way, which takes a lot of the pressure off in a way. So it's sort of interesting, like it's sort of interesting, the sort of difference between the two, but. You know, it's nice getting to a stage where somebody believes in you enough to be like, I'm gonna front this risk.
Yeah.
You know, that's quite a nice thing, I think, and that was the main that was the sort of difference, and you know, and Baby Reindeer was, I think Francesca said something along the lines of, I love one-man shows, you know, the cheapest to produce, but then of course we asked for God knows how many projectors and revolving stages and all these kinds of things, and
and so Francesca Moody is the producer. Like, was it that you had the script for Baby Reindeer, like one of the versions, one of the many, and then was Francesca on board, and then did she sort of pitch it to the Bush? Like, what was the sort of journey?
Oh well, actually,
programmed.
The Bush was kind of we did a preview at the Bush. I think they were doing like a comedy theatre thing, and we did a preview at the Bush that Jess and Deirdre came down to. They're producers at the Bush, and they came down to see it, and they were interested in that point. And when the net came in, we had some meetings and all that kind of stuff. So it sort of grew organically from this preview.
And so when was that? Like, what was that, like last year?
I think that preview was actually December, like 20th, 2000. What was the last year?
2018.
Yeah, I think it was like then.
Okay, cool.
I'd done a few previews before that and stuff like that, but that sort of gauged their interest when they decided to do this comedy thing. And I remember saying to them at the time, look, I don't want to do a comedy show. Can I actually try a theatre as a comedian trying theatre?
Yeah.
And they seemed to really, really like that.
Yeah.
And they came down and they were very supportive. And then their interest sort of stayed on it. And then when Lynette came in, she was great. And she believed in it, as did Daniel. And I was very humbled that they were interested in it. And I'm really proud to be somewhere like that. I mean, isn't it great?
Yeah.
Like, it's a great theatre, and it's a great first season. Lynette's amazing, and there's so much buzz about the place. I feel very humbled to be part of that, especially coming from a world where just a different world, you know. Like there's always the worry that people don't know that I appreciate it because he's comedy. I don't really know that, you know. Sometimes I go into these production meetings and they're talking about stretch gauzes, and I'm like, what the hell is all this? Do you know what I mean? And all this kind of stuff, and it was just very exciting. And they sort of just saw the bones of something in that December preview and wanted to stay involved. So that was very nice. Yeah.
And so, what was the rehearsal process like in the run up to Edinburgh? And then what was it then like having it in front of audiences, specifically for Baby Reindeer?
Yeah, stressful. You know, it was a very technical show. There was a lot of moving parts, video, audio, stage. You know, we had a revolve, and the revolve broke quite early on into rehearsals. And, you know, how do you block something if you don't have the revolving element that is key to the whole show? So, you know, there was a lot of stress, a lot of panic. But above all, a sense that we're all moving and we're all in this together, you know, in a very, very positive way. There was a team energy that I loved. That we were all panicked, but we were all panicked together.
In it together, yeah.
And but you know, there was a lot of stuff. Things as well, like when you outsource stuff in the theatre world, which is very different to comedy. You sort of outsource stuff, and you have somebody who goes away, and there was already an audio design from the Bush. That I put together, but you give that to someone like who will put it through speakers and do their own version of it. Yeah. And then same with the video, and so people are delivering stuff at different times. So you never actually get a sense of it all hanging together until you're in that dress rehearsal, the tech rehearsal in Edinburgh, and then you're in the room, and it's the first time you're like, well, is this going to work? Yeah. Because all the elements are together for the first time. And you know, and then you got like 6 hours to tech, which isn't enough really, because at the Bush you get like a day, maybe even more. But then I just remember being in Edinburgh and having this 6 hour tech, and everyone was running around, and you know, and I think I remember we had a lunch break, and I remember I think there's 21 or maybe 24 scenes, and there's like short scenes in the whole show. And I think we lunch break like halfway through our designated tech on about scene 3 or 4. No! And you know, there was terror in the eyes of everyone. So we had to pinch tech time here and there, a few hours there, a few hours here, and somehow we all got it to where it needed to be. But it was it was stressful seat of the pants. Yeah. It was a tough process because of all the tech elements. You know, you're putting your faith in phlegmatic technical stuff. Yeah. It's mad.
And then what was it like in front of an audience, especially given that you hadn't had that much time to kind of put all of those tech elements together?
We exactly. We hadn't had time to put the tech elements together. We were doing all these things. There was a lot of rehearsals in rooms. There was a lot of all the tech team and all the crew, and we were all like in bedrooms, in flats, sort of trying to recreate the thing and recreate the projection somehow on like this bedroom floor. And it was stressful, like and I think the first show, there was a sense that the first show, I think, you know, I even think like there was some, I won't name names, but I heard some people naming it as a write-off, which I never want to go on stage thinking something's going to be a write-off, but I remember you know, we there was a show and we were standing on stage, and I knew the blocking roughly. There was like hundreds of cues. Poor Caitlin, she's amazing, but there was honestly I think 500 cues, maybe even more. She's hitting the spacebar like all the time, all the way through the show. And of course there's the revolve that she's doing where she has to revolve the stool. And there was and I just remember going out being like genuinely feeling a sense of sort of terror as to how this was going to play out. And weirdly, it just sort of, sometimes first night note, it just sort of clicked. There was certainly mistakes. There was certainly me standing in the wrong place. There was certainly like times when I wasn't lit or I was given like a monologue. There were certainly times when the stool was rotating when it shouldn't have been, and all this stuff that we were. it got received so well. The audience laughed loads, and I wasn't aware that it was funny. And then I remember they all sort of stood up at the end, and I was just very I was very surprised by that because we were all, I could see that we were all sort of like this we're panicked about this show. Like there was panic in the air.
I'm feeling like that sounds quite similar to how you felt about Monkey See, Monkey Do, even though with that process you were much more alone in lots of ways.
Yes,
this is like, this show will be the ruin of me. And then like the sort of panic of Baby Reindeer and all the tech. And it feels like there's something in your work about like doing something incredibly ambitiously or like feeling like something's a huge risk and it like paying off really well. And that feeling like it translates incredibly well to theatre because it's like, I'm going to do something in a weird way that maybe no one will be into, but I'm going to do it and I'm going to be gung-ho about it, and then it like comes off quite well.
Yeah, absolutely. Every time I do a show, I'm like, it's not going to be a panicked rush, but no matter what happens, it always is. Do you know what I mean? It's always like those 2 weeks, just somehow you feel like they slip away from you.
And to be fair, I think that is theatre. That's just like what happens. You're like, oh God, there's never enough time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was the same with Monkey See, Monkey Do. I remember sitting with Owen, who was one of the producers at Burke's Nest, and I remember sitting with him and just like being like, this is, you know, they're going to be like, this is, I just feeling like we'd done a preview in Balham, and it was like, I remember it was a disaster. That was our last one before Edinburgh, and it just wasn't good. And I think we were both terrified without sort of admitting it. And I think I was trying to be like, look, Owen, I'm terrified about this. And him trying to convince me that I shouldn't be, knowing fine well in his eyes he was terrified too. And I remember being backstage on opening night, sort of, it was free fringe, so it was this rudimentary sort of pub space. It was great venue, but it was like, I had to hide behind a curtain and tape to the wall. Like, I'd just been like, oh, I can't believe I'm about to do this. This could be the longest month of my life. And then the show just clicked. It just mad clicked. And then again, people stood up, I remember, and I just remember just and it turned into being the best month of my life. It just shows you can never predict things. It's crazy. It's
really lovely to hear when my play's going to be on soon. It's like a really lovely like thing to hear before starting rehearsals. That's like very inspiring and comforting. Thank you, Richard. I'm like interested in like what you think success looks like. Like if you could imagine yourself as successful, what that might look like.
Yeah. That's an interesting question. I think it could be kind of dangerous to think that way. I don't know. I feel like there's degrees of success. I mean, I would say success is just giving it a shot in the first place in a way, and just like having the goal to do it. Like anyone who takes a show to the Fringe and puts himself in the firing line, even if they're performing to one person at night, they're doing what they love and they're giving it a shot. That is success. There's success just being full-time at something that's hard to be full-time at. But then there's people who see success as having £1 million in a yacht. So I certainly don't see it as that. But you know, it's a tricky question. I try not think about it. I try not define success, because I think the second you do, you clamber for something that is sort of almost without definition anyway. So you're clambering for something that sort of is completely subjective, and I think that's tricky.
I think also like sometimes I view something as, oh, I'll be really successful if I do that, and then sometimes in my life I've done it, and then I'm like, okay, wow, what next? Like,
yes,
and
exactly,
so I think that's a really nice way of thinking about it, where it's like the next project that happening is success.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
You've made something and you've done something that you love. That's a really.
I've had dreams and stuff, and I think that dreaming is nicer than the idea of success.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And I think that's it. You know, I think of what the next thing I want to do is, rather than where I want to be in 5-10 years. Yeah, and all that stuff. And I think that's quite a healthy way of doing it.
I love that. You've led on very well to my next question. I'm also interested in like what inspires you and like what you're excited about doing next.
Yeah. I get inspired by work that I sort of obsess with. I love like the feeling of you know, watching something and feeling overwhelmed by like incredible art and stuff like that. I get a lot of it through television, and you know, I talk about Black Watch. I talk about a show I saw called Roadkill like years ago as well. In you know, I saw Bryony Kimming's show recently, and I, you know, it sort of, you know, that feeling where you're awestruck is what inspires me to try and be as good as that. And you know, I even had it watching like the last season of Fleabag. I know that's something that's thrown around a lot, but I watched it pretty much in a wonder when I was ill in bed, and I was overwhelmed by how sort of it was almost like mythically perfect. It was sort of crazy, you know. You know, I think about that. I think about The Wire, The Sopranos, all these stuff that's like sort of inspired me. And I think to stay like inspired is to keep seeing things that do inspire you, to remind you of things, to remind you of trying to do something like that, you know. And what was the second part of the question?
What you're excited about doing next?
Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm excited. Like, we're going to tour the show around. They're going to go to New York and LA.
Whoa.
We might even be going to Singapore and Hong Kong.
Oh my God, sick.
So I'm excited to sort of take the show around and see how it is in different places, different cultures.
Yeah.
Go to different countries and experience what that is like. I'm very excited for that. You know, I sort of enjoy, like my goal was to do a theatre show. And I sometimes think, like, when you sort of achieve a goal or you've arrived at the next thing that you wanted to do, I quite like riding that wave for a bit and seeing what happens, rather than like being like, right, what's next? And putting that sort of pressure on myself. So I'm going to enjoy this moment for a while first. But I'm looking forward to touring. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens and how the show could splinter off into other forms. Who knows?
And can you remind our listeners when it's going to be on?
Oh yes, please. That would be great. Yes. The show is going to be on next at the Bush Theatre in London. It's going to be on from the 9th of October to the 9th of November. And I'm very excited. I think there's matinees every Wednesday and Saturday.
Ah, nice. And so where's it touring to in the UK?
I think we're going to do that. I don't know whether we've figured out the dates because I've got like an acting job next year. There's a bit of jiggery pokery we have to do.
But will be available to be viewed in 2020 as well.
Yes. And I'm sure I'll... do I announce my Twitter? I always put them down in a pinned tweet. I always put my dates up. So at Mr. Richard Gadd, more information will be released there.
Great. Thank you so much for that seamless plug.
It was terrible.
No. Complete. So necessary though. Thank you so much for joining me. It was so wonderful to talk to you.
Lovely to talk to you as well.
Yeah.
And I look forward to seeing your play.
Oh, thanks. Thanks so much for listening to Making It. If you'd like to hear more, make sure to subscribe and leave us a cheeky 5-star review. You can also follow me on Twitter @WilkeyWay, and you can book to see my debut play, The High Table, which will be on at the Bush Theatre in Shepherd's Bush from February the 8th. Making It is produced by Jane Ryan, edited and scored by Kasra Firouzyar, photography by Jess Ravel, artwork by Theo Banner, and hosted by me, Temi Wilkey. The podcast is supported by the Bush Theatre and London Playwrights, and is a proud member of the OneFinePlay network.